Hey there guys, it's Metro, and today we are back with yet another Death Knight guide. It's not really a guide this time, but a lot of people have been asking since we've had one full rotation of Affix sets in Battle for Azeroth, how do I feel about them? So I'm going to give you guys a little perspective from a Blood Death Knight, especially a Pugging Blood Death Knight, giving my opinions on which I feel are from least to most favorite. A lot of that is going to be based on personal preference, things that a little selfish. A lot of people might think, well, this set is the easiest to push on because of this reason that affects the entire group. But for me, I'm only thinking about it from the tank perspective. Hopefully this will help you, give you your own formative opinion. But again, it's just 100% my opinion, and a lot of bias, a lot of personal selfish reasons are going to go in this. So we're going to go by every affix set. There's 12 total, and then we're going to rank them by the affix as well later on. So for now, first thing I want to say is a lot of people ask me, how I feel about BFA Mythic Plus compared to Legion, and I think the answer is BFA Mythic Plus is better in every way. Almost everything I loved about Legion Mythic Plus is better in BFA, and a lot of that is things that frustrate me, like the fact that I'm getting challenged by some of these affixes. This is good design, frankly. You just got to put your personal opinions aside and realize that this is a better environment for Mythic Plus. It should not just be a face roll encounter, and a lot of that is based on the design of the dungeon, the changes to things like Sanguine, to things like Quacking, to things like Bolstering. These dungeons are designed with this stuff in mind, and there is a lot more to be concerned with when there's all of this stuff happening in these close quarters, especially dungeons like Toldagor, Shrine of the Storm. Pretty much every dungeon has one really problematic area with either Teeming, either Sanguine, either Quacking, either, even Raging, things like that. But Infest is a big part of it, okay? So when I'm going down this list, I'm thinking a lot about how it interacts with Infested. We have yet to be able to test Reaping. We were on the PTR last week. It still doesn't work. It's not on there, so I don't know anything about Reaping yet, really, other than the stuff we've been told. So maybe my opinion is going to change heavily once Reaping comes out, because some of these do interact harshly with Infested. But for now, we're going to go down the list and give my opinion of everything with Infested instead, okay? So this is going to be, again, from least to most favorite. Least desirable to most desirable, however you want to consider it. And number one least favorite set of affixes is Sanguine Grievous Fortified. All right, I absolutely hate Grievous. They buffed it or nerfed it, whatever you want to consider it. They made it easier, let's put it that way. So this was a week that I absolutely hated when it was happening. If you were watching the stream that week, you might remember it as the only week I ever did not want to do Mythic Plus dungeons on my Death Knight. Literally, I quit. We had 4 streams planned, and the last 2 I just decided to not even do them, just because I wanted to do them on alts and not deal with Grievous. And at the time, Grievous was way worse. They did nerf it, whatever. It's a lot easier now, quote unquote. It's just different, if you ask me. It's easier to prevent from stacking, but even though they nerfed it to only 4 stacks instead of 5, it still does a lot of damage if everybody has 4 stacks, max stacks. So this was a problem that week because Sanguine was baiting people to stand in it with Infested spawning in it, and it's a real problem with Sanguine. This is another reason why Sanguine is really tough, and I hated this expansion, but also because of the way you have to move the mobs, and there's not a lot of places to go with some of these small dungeons. So regardless, everybody is standing in Sanguine, getting multiple stacks of Grievous. We got 4 plus, however many, 4 or 5 stacks. Everybody's got a couple stacks. The healer is being forced to heal it off. Then combat ends, and people are not drinking, they're not eating, they're not helping the healer heal it off with spells, etc. And this is causing the healer to go out of mana pretty much every pack. Now, this is easily solved with just a sugar-crusted fish feast. Everybody would drop, everybody would drop everybody would drop Grievous stacks, and then the healer would be drinking at the same time. But nobody ever had it, so it was causing me to basically have to spend thousands of gold a run on just those feasts. And I just didn't want to do it. I'm like, listen, I'm not going to carry this group with consumables. You guys have to bring your own stuff. Nobody was doing it. And, no matter what Grievous does on its own, it was really the combination with Sanguine and Grievous that made me hate it, because absolutely nobody was caring about not standing in Sanguine, and people were not helping themselves on Grievous. So that was definitely the least fun I've had in Mythic Plus this expansion. Now, number 2 least favorite is a similar one, Sanguine and Necrotic. Basically the same reasons. Necrotic obviously is a pain in the ass, no matter what, as a tank, especially now that they're nerfing it, or whatever you want to consider it. They're making it harder for blood DKs. This is, again, made before that happened, so I don't know how I'll feel about it, but I'd imagine it'll still be among my least favorite affixes, just because I absolutely hate kiting in Mythic Plus dungeons. So Sanguine plus Necrotic, that is the current week as I'm making it, I absolutely do not like kiting, and you have to kite. It is absolutely mandatory to be kiting when you are doing these 2 affixes. So there's not really much option. Unfortunately, you got to do it. And now, especially with Necrotic going physical, I think I'll like it even less. But it's the same problem. Sanguine just causes so many problems in some of these dungeons like Waycrest Manor, Toldagor, etc. that I just can't stand doing them with these affixes. Next up is third least favorite, Raging Necrotic Tyrannical. Okay, this is a week that again, Necrotic is on, and it's always going to be one of my least favorites. But Raging, I dislike for one specific reason, is that even though it can be dispelled, it now mandates those classes in the run, and it forces them to actually play their class, which, you know, sounds stupid. The fact that I'm bitching about them being able to be dispelled now makes it considerably easier than Legion, but I don't feel like, for the most part in Legion, it ever needed to be dispelled. There was a couple mini bosses that would rage that I was like, oh god, this is bad with raging. But this expansion, there's so many mobs that do so many dangerous abilities, especially on trash. Luckily, this is a tyrannical week, so it's not nearly as bad as it could be. But on top of that, with Necrotic, I feel like I have very little control over the dungeon. I'm constantly trying to fight for my own survival, and if people are not dispelling the rage, or for some reason we don't have the right classes, or the class dies, etc., then you're feeling very helpless, and I don't really like that. So number 4 least favorite overall is Bolstering Grievous Tyrannical. Absolutely hate Grievous, like I said, as a tank, and more so as the dungeon leader, because I just can't stand watching people not deal with their own problems, not eating food to help the healer, and making the dungeon run that much longer. And speaking of the dungeon running that much longer, Bolstering is, in my opinion, the one that makes it run the longest. The fix that adds the most time to any dungeon set is going to be Bolstering, because no matter how well you prepare for it, you're always going to just be fighting mobs for considerably longer than you want to. But again, luckily it's a tyrannical week, so it's not nearly as bad. But you know, there's some give and take to Bolstering. I don't mind Bolstering, and we'll talk about it again later down on the list. But Bolstering, you know, even though it encourages pulling only 1 pack at a time, it still is tremendously detrimental with Infested. You have to CC, and nobody ever CCs, so it's a pain. It's just a real pain with that. So that on top of Grievous. Now, a similar set of affixes is my 5th least favorite. This is Bolstering, Tyrannical, and Explosive instead of Grievous. I actually don't mind Explosive. In fact, it's on its own, it would be one of my favorite affixes. But again, this is easily the week that is going to cost you the most time. Tyrannical is, again, not the worst to fix this expansion, but Bolstering is going to add so much extra time to the dungeon, and Explosive is going to add even more time to the dungeon, because the more times you're switching to Explosive, the more damage you're not doing to adds. And a lot of times you'll see 3 people switch to Explosive and overkill it to 100%, and they'll switch back, and, you know, now we're behind on the mobs. We're not interrupting the mobs. It's causing all kinds of problems. So these 2 things together combined, you know, a really bad set of affixes that definitely are on the higher end of things that I wasn't having fun with. So number 6 overall is the midway point. This is where we start to take the turn here, things that I don't mind as much, and this is Busting and Quacking. Now, the first entry for both Busting and Quacking. Quacking is an affix that is considerably harder in BFA, if you ask me. Really just, you just take, it doesn't do any more damage percent-wise, but I feel like our health pools are far more pervious. I don't know, they're far more inflexible in terms of this type of 10% hit, and if people are not able to spread out, it makes it much worse. And like I said, there's a lot of dungeons like Toldagor, Waycrest Manor, etc. It's pretty much impossible not to hit somebody else with Quacking at times. So you're going to be troubled there. And Busting is not going to make it any easier. Now, again, this is as a Blood Decay perspective, so I don't really mind Busting, because AMS is going to completely negate it. If you use AMS before the stacks apply, you will not get them. If you use it after the stacks applied, you will not take damage from them as long as the Absorb holds. So it's really not that bad for me. But again, as the group leader, seeing Busting and Quacking happening, it's like, all right, you know what? This is just not going well here. Again, the healer is constantly having to work much harder than he needs to, so not a big fan of that. Number 7, again, now we're on the other side. Things are starting to go towards more likable, but still, Teeming and Quacking, same problem. Teeming, a lot more mobs, and even though I really do like Teeming, When you have that many mobs, you're going to have to be dealing with the mechanics of the mobs a lot more, and this means the healer is going to have a lot less attention to spend on actual healing, and of course, making up for mistakes is going to be the top priority, so that on top of Quacking is stressing him out to no end. He's not going to be able to stand still, he's not going to be able to get cast off at the right times, and a poorly timed Quack, especially combined with Teeming, will cause deaths. If we have multiple mobs casting at the same time and people are getting interrupted or not being able to cast because of that, then we're going to have a lot of difficulty in the dungeon. And again, this is a fortified week, so pretty much any fortified week, any teaming week with fortified is going to be extremely dangerous. Even though I like doing fortified, it's going to be very dangerous. Okay, so that was number 7. My 8 least favorite, so again, getting closer to my top, is Fortified Teeming Explosive, right? So similar to the previous set, Teeming again causing a lot of problems with trash. I quite like Teeming though, honestly. I love trash. Trash is my favorite part of Mythic Plus. So, Fortified Teeming Explosive, this could be one of my favorite weeks. But it still adds so much dungeon time. The trash itself is so problematic. And wiping the trash, even though it's not nearly as painful as wiping the bosses, in my opinion, it's not as morale breaking. I just, don't like wiping the trash. It just doesn't feel good. So, when you have Teeming and Explosive, this means the mobs are very voluminous and there's going to be a lot more explosive, a lot more damage needed to kill the explosives. Even though they nerf the explosives, still going to take a lot of time away from killing the pack. And even though I like dealing with Teeming, really is just not a good combination here. Teeming and Explosive, as you guys know, was a very painful week. That was just recently. The 9th least favorite, so now again, the 4th most favorite, Bolstering, Skittish, Fortified. Okay, we're getting to the point now where Skittish is in the play here. Pretty much a non-affix for me. If you know my Blood Death Knight, I pretty much never deal with Skittish, especially with the tools we have available to us with Gorfine's Grasp, Double Taunt thanks to regular grip, and of course the slow on D&D, the amount of burst we have with Blood Boil, Dancing Rune Weapon, etc. Pretty much never going to have problems with Skittish. Even when I do have problems, they're going to be heavily mitigated. And again, Bolstering is not my favorite affix. So, compared to the next 3 or 4, whatever's left, it's not my favorite affix, but it does actually work out pretty well this week. Again, because people are not going to want to encourage me to pull massive pulls with Bolstering, so I don't mind it at all. I actually don't mind it on this set of affixes because the second affix pretty much has nothing to do with it, but it is tied to Fortified, and that can make, Bolstering plus Fortified, it can make it pretty tough, so not the best. Now, the last 3 are all going to be Tyrannical keys, which I don't actually love doing Tyrannical, but it's the combination of Tyrannical and these other ones that make it extremely easy, extremely approachable as a Blood DK, and actually give, I feel like, the best counterplay Blood DK can offer here. So we have Busting and Skittish Tyrannical. That's my 10th least favorite, 3rd most favorite. Busting, again, is entirely optional as the Blood DK, basically. You can do whatever you want with it. You could AMS it and it will just go away. So if you do that well, you're going to make a massive impact on the dungeon. I'm talking about, out of all of these affixes, this is probably one of the ones with the most counterplay from Blood Death Knight, all right? Now, it's not going to be up for every pack, obviously, but you really shouldn't be pulling massive packs, even though you might be encouraged to with the Tyrannical week. Even, on top of Skittish, it's not really going to be a problem. Just be aware that these 2 things are basically not affixes for Blood DK. So we're getting into the realm here where it's like, all right, there's almost nothing to be concerned with, okay? And that makes it a lot more fun. I can do a lot more crazy things. Even if people die, I can solo a lot easier because these affixes are basically not affecting me when I'm soloing. These are 3 of the best soloing weeks as well. Even though they're Tyrannical weeks, I do feel like Tyrannical is going to be better for soloing now because, these affixes basically don't do anything. All 3 that are remaining, okay? 11 is Tyrannical Raging Volcanic. So second to least favorite, or second favorite, 11th least favorite, Raging Volcanic Tyrannical. Again, Raging basically can be dispelled. I dislike it compared to the 12th slot because it needs a class, it needs a druid, it needs a hunter, etc. Right? You have to have these things, and if they don't play well or dispel at the right times, or there's multiple mobs raging at the same time, they can't dispel them all, then it's still a problem. All right, it's still less fun than otherwise, and it feels like it's mandatory now to have those classes. I'm not a big fan of that, but it's Volcanic. Volcanic literally does not happen when you're in melee range. Unless you are not in melee range, you will never see Volcanic as a tank. So this means soloing is extremely easy with this week. These are the 2 weeks you definitely want to try soloing, because Volcanic literally does not happen if you're in melee range. If you're not in melee range, no matter if you're a tank or not, it will still target you. But 9 times out of 10, you're never going to see Volcanic in the tank role. So very good. And then my least favorite. So my favorite affix 12 overall, number 1 favorite affix, Teeming, Volcanic, Tyrannical. Just an absolute godsend of a week. I absolutely love it. Volcanic, again, completely trivial mechanic as a tank, has nothing to impact me whatsoever, and it's Tyrannical and Teeming. This is like an oxymoron, right? Like, they don't go together. Teeming and Tyrannical do not go together, okay? All 3 of these affixes do not affect me, basically. I love Teeming when there's extra mobs and they're not going to wipe us, so this is the week for it. And, you know, Tyrannical, even though I don't prefer Tyrannical over Fortified, Tyrannical just synergizes way better with certain affixes in BFA, so it's almost just a free thing to have this expansion. So I would say that is my favorite week. When you see Teeming, Tyrannical, Volcanic, or really any Volcanic or Skittish week, the top 4 are all going to be Skittish and Volcanic, because they basically just don't affect Blood Death Knight. All right, so I would recommend checking those weeks out, especially if you're playing a Blood DK. Now, I also want to talk about the actual affixes as well. We're going to break them down by tier. So Tyrannical and Fortified is on its own tier, obviously. Now, especially with it being on the early affix, it's more important than it was last expansion, but it has less of an impact than it did. So Tyrannical used to be the one that you hated doing in Legion, and I'm still kind of in that mindset. Now, a lot of people are going to disagree. A lot of people are going to say that Tyrannical is the easier affix this expansion because of the trash having so much more difficulty tied to it, many more mechanics, etc. But I still hate doing these bosses that are taking 3 to 4 minutes, especially on higher keys. They don't have these one-shot components like they did in Legion, but it's still not fun for me. I don't enjoy it. And I feel like if I'm going to solo save something, that is, Tyrannical is going to make it harder overall, because it's a lot harder to leech off, you know, with Bone Storm, etc. I'm going to get less value from my self-healing components. But, you know, like I said, Tyrannical probably is easier, even though it's my least favorite affix. I just really like trash. I like trash to be the hard part of dungeons, and even though trash can be difficult, I do love the idea of just pulling small, focusing fire, you know, marking, interrupting, CCing, etc., knocking back to prevent things. I feel like there's a lot more skill involved in dealing with trash. So the Fortified week is always going to be my preference, because it means we can just blow down bosses. I'm talking about this week, we killed the first boss in under, what was that, 13? Oh my god, it died in like less than a minute. It was absurd. So that is really a reason that Fortified can be beneficial, and it's the reason I find it more fun. Now for the second tier, we have Sanguine. So this, you know, hopefully you guys know these affixes. My least favorite on this tier is Sanguine. Absolutely hate it, this expansion. It's definitely my least favorite. The dungeons are designed clearly with Sanguine in mind. It was one of the easiest affixes last expansion, and now I absolutely despise doing it as a Blood DK especially. Even though we have grips, a lot of ways to deal with Sanguine, it's just so unfun dealing with it in these close quarters. Second least favorite on this tier is Raging, again because it really forces you into bringing a druid, hunter, etc. You have to have their attention as well. If they make any mistakes with the dispels at the wrong time, you can easily die through basically no fault of your own as a Blood DK. And even though it's better than it was in Legion because it can be dispelled, it feels way more detrimental when you don't dispel because of that, probably. Third least favorite is Busting. Again, we're getting to the point where it's like, well, I dislike the affix because it does a lot of damage to my group. Again, prevents, you know, big AoE, which I love to do. Burst with Dancing Rune Weapon and Blood Boil, I like to go real hard, but I can just negate it. And it's a double-edged sword, right? If I negate it, that's fine, but if everybody else dies to it, then it doesn't really help, right? So still kind of on the, you know, teetering edge there. It's kind of the middle one. I don't dislike it, but I don't love it either. Bolstering I actually love on its own. Again, Bolstering is one of my favorite affixes on its own, but it combines very poorly with other affixes, so it's definitely my second favorite in this list here, because what it does by its own is it really encourages you to not pull big, and I would much prefer that. I hate the pressure that's there when people are like, oh, let's pull 6 packs, bro. Like, I don't like doing that in Mythic Plus dungeons. There's no way to reset them like there was in challenge mode. I loved it in challenge mode. I love pulling 6 dungeons. If we fail, we just start over. That's fine. it's not an option in Mythic Plus. If you fail, people are just going to leave, and that's the group. So I really dislike pulling more than we have to, and Bolstering helps with that. What helps even more with that is Teeming, and that's why it's my #1 affix in this tier. Absolutely love Teeming in a vacuum because, again, it makes trash more interesting. I love doing trash. It makes trash more complicated. I love being engaged by trash, and it prevents people from thinking, oh, let's pull 5 packs. Because guess what? Now there's 20 mobs, 20 mobs in a normal set with 5. Now there's going to be 50 mobs because of Teeming at times, right? Regardless, that is definitely my #1 affix on that set. And then finally, the hardest here is my least favorite is going to be Grievous. Again, absolutely cannot stand Grievous, especially because it pairs so poorly with Sanguine now. Grievous, even though it's been nerfed or whatever you want to consider it, made easier, I think it's still one of the most detrimental affixes for the Keystone, especially as a tank, because again, I have no control over my group members. I cannot help them with Grievous. I cannot really do anything for them other than try to interrupt or outplay the content. And if they do not eat their own food, if they do not prepare for the pack or the dungeon at hand, then they are dead. They're lost. I cannot do anything for them other than sit there and wait for the healer to interact with it, and that is not fun. Next up is Necrotic. Again, as you know, I hate Necrotic. I hate kiting. I hate dealing with any affix that's going to make me not be able to do DPS, not stand there and tank the mobs. So yeah, definitely my least favorite there because of that. But also now that it's getting nerfed, whatever you consider it, made harder for blood decay, it's going to be a lot harder to counterplay it. So we'll see how that goes in the future. Quacking is my next least favorite, third least favorite for sure, because yet again, a lot of these keys are bringing a lot of melee. So we're bringing 2 melee pretty much to every key thanks to Rogue Demon Hunter's prominence. We're seeing 3 damage healers basically tank as well. Sometimes the healer is in there as well, so that's 4 people in melee. Just pretty much impossible to not hit one of them by accident, and it really makes me have to focus on something I don't want to focus on, and that's dealing with this affix. It was a bigger problem in Legion when I was using Blood Drinker every week. Not really using Blood Drinker anymore, so that's not really a big problem. But regardless, oh my god, I just hate dealing with Quacking because everybody is running around in circles, they're not doing mechanics, and I'm hitting them with it. So not nearly as bad as Grievous and Necrotic because those affect me directly. But Quacking affects me as maybe like a group leader a little bit more than a tank, so that's a problem. And now we're getting again on the other side of it. Explosive has its detriments, no doubt. I dislike the affix as a leader of a group, but as an individual, I absolutely love it because it encourages me to constantly be making these big switches. I think Death Knight is one of the best tanks in the game for explosive. I really like dealing with explosive as a Death Knight. Pretty much, we have 3 different abilities that are really fun to use on explosive. One of them being Blood Drinker, which normally you would not really take, especially on trash weeks. But I do really like the affix for Blood Drinker, the Blood Drinker for the affix more so. But now that it's been nerfed, it feels overkill. It used to be, I used to feel like it was kind of just like a mandatory thing. Like use it whenever there was a ranged explosive that you didn't think the group was going to be able to handle. Guaranteed delete that explosive. But now that it's got so little health, I feel like I can just throw a couple Blood Plagues out or whatever and it would die. I don't really know. So Death's Caresses might be enough. I'm not sure. But I still like explosive because I like turning to things, killing them. Like it's almost like a whack-a-mole minigame. Like click that thing, hit it. Click that thing, hit it. It's actually quite fun. It's really engaging. But again, it can cause a lot of problems as a tank. Then we have Skittish as my second most favorite, 4th or 5th least favorite actually. Skittish is just free as a blood decay. These last 2 are just free. They don't do anything. Skittish and then Volcanic is my most favorite, all right, obviously. They don't do anything. It doesn't do anything as a tank. As a Blood Death Knight, you do not have problems with Skittish. You do not have problems with Volcanic. Case is arrested. All right, thank you for watching. A lot of people have been asking this. I'm going to have a description, a text, whatever, in the description. If you guys want to see this, it was a little hard to follow. Maybe you could check it out. But otherwise, thank you for watching. I've been having a great time with Battle for Azeroth Mythic Plus. I guess a lot of people haven't. I don't know what to say. A lot of people are asking me constantly if I like them, and I do like them. I think they're better than Legion. I think they're even more fun than Legion. I think a lot of people who are saying they're not more fun than Legion are just being selfish. I think they want things to be as free and easy as possible. They don't want challenge in their video game. They don't want to overcome adversity. They don't want to play to their best ability. And I don't play like that. I want to be challenged. I want to play, I want to be rewarded for high skill plays. And I think a lot of these Affix sets do reward you for high skill plays. Sanguine and Grievous, I don't feel like rewards you for high skill plays, and that's why I hate it the most. And that's why I love, Teeming, Volcanic, Tyrannical, because I feel like there's a lot more options that you can, you can outplay this content when these affixes aren't bogging you down. So, anyway, that's everything. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one.